Jian Pei, Professor, School of Computing Science at Fraser University, and a well-known researcher in areas that our listeners are very much interested in: data science, big data, data mining, and database systems. Welcome to the Data Exchange podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
I actually have you here because of a very interesting new paper you wrote, which is a survey on data pricing from economics to data science, and I will make sure to link to it in the episode notes to this episode. So first of all, first question, John, why did a researcher in big data, data mining, and data science write a survey paper on pricing data?
Yeah, very good question. Indeed.
And a very comprehensive one, and by yourself as well. So it must have been a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. Well, indeed, I was motivated to look at data pricing, data valuation problem during my collaborations with my industry collaborators for a long time. Well, in the past, when we work on data science problems, we work on model building, we work on classifications, we work on the data preprocessing, and we work on many individual steps. However, if we look at industry practice, what they really need is an end-to-end process. They need to connect multiple components, multiple parties, multiple data owners, multiple data users together. And what's the way to connect them? Ideally, there should be some smooth connections, but in reality, you have to use market mechanism. And once we think about market, you have to think about the value of the data, the value of the models, the value of the data science findings.
John, for our audience so for some of our audience who work in tech companies, they might listen to you and say, well, if I need data, I just instrument the website and then let it run, let the instrumentation run for a week, and then I have enough data. I don't need to work with other partners. So give us some examples where what you're describing is more routine.
Okay. Indeed, this is a very good question. If you think about, you can set up a website and provide some services, and then you can harvest your data in a week. And this is not that quite true, because one thing is that you need to decide whether you should ask your users to grant you the data usage right. And there's a trade-off. Many users many data providers may have very high expectation on the value of their data. They may ask a lot. So you need to really need to think about, well, whether you can afford the consequence of those data usage. It is not that simple. You just say, oh, I open a service and ask the users to provide me the data. And a lot of those data you collect may be very shallow, and also may have quite substantial consequence in legal responsibility, in the for the social good. Therefore, we need to really study whether it is a good trade-off between getting the data for free. I mean, it is not free. Indeed, you need to provide a lot of services, and also guarantee on the second use to the users. Or you just say, I don't collect the data. I just provide you the service. You pay me for the service.
And John, there are actually industries and domains where it's not unusual for people to seek out data providers, right? So I worked for a few years in the hedge fund industry, and as you know, they're always looking for extra signals, new features, and they have they don't. Price is not material as long as the data stream is actually providing them a great signal, right? So that's one example. But I imagine there are actually other domains where there's an actual advantage where if you work with other people, you can pull data, then you have a larger data set, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, well, in the big data era, in general, we have signals, we have strong signals, we have weaker signals, we have even weaker signals. So it really depends on your product design and how weak signal you want to catch and how long the long tail you want to cover. So to that
So,
extent, you need to look at your budget and then get a good pricing strategy to harvest the most important part for your product.
so what are some of the key approaches for valuing data?
This is a very good question, and indeed, this is the part. So far, there's no systematic approach that a company can just grab and use. There are many different ways to do that. For example, many research are based on the machine learning models. So they say, okay, the value of data may be evaluated by looking at how much it can help me to improve the performance of a machine learning model.
What's the delta in the
Yeah,
machine learning model in terms of if I use your data,
accuracy.
my performance was a certain level of accuracy. I
Yeah,
add your data, it
yeah,
improves by so much, and that much value, I can value that based on my business.
yeah. For example, if I say the data set can help me to improve 1% in my sales, and then 1% if my sales turns to $10 million in the market per month, and then probably I'm willing to give $1 million to attribute to the data set.
So
So this,
let's say, John, that's the case. So it's a straightforward, I can see the delta, but
Mhm.
the reality is machine learning models, the performance changes over time. So you don't
Yeah,
necessarily want to lock yourself into a long-term contract, right?
yeah, but you can do it like a subscription or month by month update. But even that may not be very fair to the data providers because in this model you only look at the outcome of the data, but you do not look at the cost of producing the data, and you do not look at the competition among the data providers.
Yeah, if they have a monopoly of some kind, right?
Yes.
Right.
There could be a data set that is ubiquitous in everywhere, so that indeed you don't really need $1 billion to collect them. Or maybe this is just the beginning of collecting this kind of data. And then at the very beginning, you may even have to put more to collect these new feature or new signal.
So I have a very nefarious example,
Mhm.
which comes from information security, which is the 0 days,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
so if you have a collection of 0 days, depending on how if it's a 0 day for Windows,
Yeah.
it's more valuable than a 0 day for some obscure piece of software. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So okay, so there's the notion of I can value it directly because I can plug it into some machine learning model.
Yeah.
So are people actually doing this?
Some companies are doing this, I guess. And also when we say we plug in the machine learning model, we can regard the model in the most general way, meaning it can be a business mechanism. So overall, you have to, any users of the data have to make ends meet.
They have to justify, right?
That's just fine. Yes.
So the one, like I said, the one industry where I think they're more likely to try things for a little while is finance, because
Yeah.
they're
Finances.
always on the lookout for an edge and they're willing to try it.
Yeah.
But then if it doesn't produce anything, they'll cut you off right away.
Yeah, and also the advertisement marketing industry.
Oh, really? So what did do you have an example there?
Yeah, for example, they try to bid for the user behavior data so that they can push their advertisements to target customers, and then they can look at what's the gain in terms of sales, in terms of new customers sign up, and then they decide whether you want to do the same marketing design again.
All right. So then, what's another way that people value data?
Another way to value data is maybe the cost of producing the data. Because some data, particularly at the very beginning, it is harder to produce or more costly to produce. For example, at the very beginning, when we try to collect some information about COVID-19, and definitely we don't know how to do it, or at least we don't know how to do it in a good scale and also in an efficient way. And you cannot say because it doesn't have a clear business value at this moment, or it doesn't have an economic value at this moment, we don't do that.
So, so in terms of economics, this is the supply side.
Yeah.
So what I mean, so yeah, so it costs you so much to produce the data, but I'm not gonna pay for your costs because I'm not sure that it's really valuable to me.
Yeah, that's true.
So how
So
do you create a market? How do you create a market for something new where you say to people, hey, look, it costs me so much to produce this data, it must be valuable, but they'll say, well, I don't know about that.
that's the nature of the data market is very different from the traditional market or traditional products. For the traditional product, when you produce the product, you know this product will be consumed by one user mainly. But for data market, one advantage or one challenge is that data can have many second uses. The same data may be used by many different users, and they do not damage the data at all. I mean, just copy and reuse it. And also they can be used in many different applications. So to some extent, if you find a good reason to collect data, make up a data product, and maybe it's almost for free to create a new second use of data.
So now
But at the same time,
there's also what about John? There's areas where um, let's say like in computer vision, right? So there's areas
yes,
like computer vision where there's multiple suppliers.
yeah,
So then doesn't because there's multiple suppliers and multiple buyers, there's kind of like that market. There's a pricing. I don't know what the term is in economics, but there's a
competing.
there's a natural mechanism for discovering the right price, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. For example, through bidding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so what about so here's a proposal or something that I've thought about as a way to value data, which is take a company uh, that is that's well known, but is most well known because of their data,
Yeah.
right? So the one example will be IMDb. They got bought by Amazon at a certain price. So then, doesn't that kind of say the value of IMDb's data? Because IMDb is basically the data.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
Exactly.
it's the acquisition price, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are multiple examples like this: Grace Note, Shazam,
Mhm.
Glassdoor, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So is is there a is there a way to map like the valuation of a company to the value of the data, right?
Yes, and those companies are indeed their value is really on the being a hub of the data. When you have only one small piece of data, you can have only a very limited space of possible applications and second uses. You have to find some big data drivers to collect and integrate multiple data together to create bigger and stronger data applications. So therefore, those data hub companies will act at this role. They collect data from multiple sources. They collect different features, signals, as you said, and then they integrate them. They create new scenarios. They create new data products, and they find new customers. And indeed, the innovation in those companies could be they tell new customers the innovative way of using data that those customers may have never ever thought about.
So,
So that's their value.
So as you wrote this paper, so you wrote this with your academic hat on. So which parts of the valuation of data products do you think are most relevant to industry practitioners?
Indeed, there are lots of things in my article are related to industry. For example, data collection and like how to add a layer to price data on every or any relational databases. And then how to value the machine learning models, because arguably machine learning model.
So explain that first thing, which is add a layer to any relational database that enables you to price data.
Okay, so for example, if I have a database and this is like a huge treasure, but for a user, I don't have the enough money to buy the whole database, and I don't really need to buy the database. Instead, I have many different questions, and I want to I want to pay by question. I ask a question, you give me the answer, I pay something. And then how can the data owner, the relational database, can charge in a proper way? For example, the database should not double charge. You should not charge twice for the same question, or should not charge for the two questions overlapping.
So but then also there will be a different pricing structure.
Yes.
It's almost like a different pricing structure for someone who subscribes, and someone who just asks questions here and there, right?
Yes. And also, for example, for different levels of applications. For example, if you want to have the weather forecasting at the city level, and definitely it is free. But if you really want to have the forecast at the very fine granularity level and a very accurate time period, then it is not free.
So what, Jian, beyond the finance, what domains do you think are the most sophisticated in their use of data markets and the pricing mechanisms that you're describing?
I think the most important is the public domain, like the government, the social good. Because a lot of data is from such areas.
That's all free, the census data, right? So
it is not free. I don't think it is really free.
Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, free at some level in terms of if you want to go to the government website, it's free, but it's hard to work with. Yes. You go to a provider, they make it easier for you to work with the data, right?
Yeah, yes. And also, if in appropriate issuing of and use of such data, it may hurt our long-term benefit. It may hurt the future of the whole society and community. So that's the reason I argued it is not free. And one problem is that the inequality of data usage in this situation, because the government just dump the data there or whatever, put the data there, and then some big companies, they may be able to use data because they have the expertise, they have the money to drive the experts to understand the data for their business applications. But for many small potatoes, they may not have the resource, they may not have the expertise and time to understand and use the data. That's a huge inequality.
So another domain, I think, as you pointed out, is ad tech.
Yeah.
Right. So if anyone who uses any of the advertising platforms knows that they have varying degrees of targeting capabilities.
Yeah.
Which means it's basically what that tells you is they have a lot of data on their users.
Yeah.
And so by using their ad platforms, you're kind of indirectly putting a price on that
Yeah.
data, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the ads basically kind of give you a rough estimate of the value of the data.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the bidding price and that will indirectly pricing the value of the data.
So is there a difference, Jian, in terms of what we've been talking about, the pricing, data products, and pricing data in general? Is there a difference in terms of maturity and level of sophistication based on regions of the world? Like, is the U.S. more advanced than Europe? Is U.S. and China kind of at the same level? So, you know what I mean? So, are people able to use some of the things that you're describing in terms of their ability to price data correctly? Is there a difference in geographic locations?
I guess in the North America and in Asian Pacific area, it is better developed, and in Europe, it is data and privacy are strongly controlled or and administered. And in the other parts, particularly those underdeveloped areas, then that's the area not that developed yet.
So here's another. I don't know if this is kind of a sci-fi method for valuing data, but take a company that people ascribe its value mostly to data, right? So I don't know, like a famous example would be one of the credit score providers like Equifax. So Equifax has a data breach, stock price plunges. So isn't that the price of the stock to the breach that would give you a sense of the value of that data, right?
Yeah.
It's basically the valuation of the company in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah. And so have you been following these data markets and data exchanges that have been popping out? So Amazon has one, Snowflake has one, and then there are data exchanges and data markets in different verticals. Like there are people trying to do it in healthcare. Have you been following the rise of? It seems like data markets was big several years ago, but now they're starting. I'm starting to see them again.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what's going on in terms of why now, but there's definitely more and more discussion about data marketplaces and data exchanges. Do you know why they're suddenly back?
There are two types of data markets or data exchange. The first is that those explicit one, as you called, then they are coming back because more and more business parties, governments, and social organizations, they want to use data.
Yeah, I guess as you were saying, that one reason why it's coming back for companies is companies have this. There's a thing that a lot of companies are trying to build, which is the customer data platform.
Yes.
Something that gives them a 360-degree view of their customers.
Yeah.
Which means they may have to actually fuse their data with external data sources.
Yes. That's exactly what they try to extend their whole database about customers. they want to profile their customers as much as possible.
Yeah, many years ago, actually, there were efforts in the financial services industry where, as you know, most of us, we have relationships with multiple financial services companies, right? So we have multiple credit cards. We might have banking relationships with more than one bank, and so on and so forth. So there was an effort. The banks wanted to try to come up with a way where they can cooperate, like a cooperative.
Yeah.
You know,
that's scary.
yeah. That's scary.
Because they know everything about you.
yeah. So you were saying, so there's two kinds of data markets. There's the explicit ones, the ones that we're talking about, and then
the other one indeed is that just say within every product, whenever you interact with your customers, your upstream and downstream partners, connecting them by data, then implicitly you have to face the data pricing or data valuation problem. For example, when you provide the service to your customer, whether you charge the customer or you just collect the data and then try to sell the data to some third party or some third party service to recover your cost. And whether you want to, in manufacturing, the same situation, whether you want to collaborate with your partners upstream or downstream to make a bigger platform or bigger pipeline to cover more business. So those are not explicit data marketing, data markets or exchange, but implicit, we still need to do data pricing or data evaluation.
Yeah, actually what you described reminds me of what's happening in the healthcare data exchange space, which is basically the practitioners and clinicians. They want to be able to work with the medical device manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
So that there's some kind of movement around that. By the way, Jian, does IoT and 5G make these topics even more important?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So someone will be vacuuming all of the data from our smart homes.
I mean, arguably, IoT and 5G, in general, is the surveillance capability and the communication capability can tremendously enlarge our capability of data collection. And first, we can monitor the things in a much finer granularity, thorough ways. And second, we can even go into many difficult corners in the past we cannot touch. So how to make those data available and turn them into business? This is a big opportunity and also the challenge.
So we've spent half hour talking about data markets, data exchanges, and pricing data. We haven't talked about responsible AI, data privacy, and data security.
Yes.
So obviously there's downsides to these technologies and these tools as well, right? So are the people building these tools cognizant of all these risks?
First of all, I would not put that in a way, say, is a downside. Indeed, I think if we can price the data in an objective and fair, responsible way, if you give people the good sense about the value, and then they can decide whether they want to trade their privacy for the benefit or not, because everything here is about the trading. So to that extent, pricing evaluation is important because it gives us the value, the benchmark, the reference.
But the reality is, I've never seen a website where, as you sign up, you go, "Are you willing for us to collect your data? And by the way, your data will be approximately $15 a year for us." I've never seen that.
You see the first part, whether you are willing to give me the data, and you also see the second part from some startups that are trying to give you the idea about the value of your data. Although these two parts are not connected yet,
So now the privacy rules like GDPR and the
Yeah.
California privacy regulations, they surely have impacted all these things that we've been talking about, right?
Yes. The most important impact is that the evaluation and also the understanding of the possible second use of the data, so that the data owners, data providers should be well informed their possible risk and the second use, and also make the explicit agreement on those uses. This is important, and correspondingly, GDPR, I think a big challenge is how we can implement the legal requirements for by GDPR.
But if one of the things is giving people the right to be deleted from a database,
Yeah, yeah,
which means if I'm the buyer of the data,
yeah.
if a lot of people start deleting themselves from the database, I should probably have some. That should be There should be adjustment to the price I'm paying, right?
Yes. I
Uh,
mean,
I'm not
uh,
sure. I'm not sure the industry is sophisticated enough to actually arrive at this moment, right?
yeah, this is something similar to transaction processing. We know the transaction processing is that when the customers and the users agree on something, they agree with a well-defined scope. Within this scope, it's done. Then if we move on to the next scope, next phase, and then we need to give the user the right to be forgotten, to delete their data in the new phase. I don't participate in that. The current practice of data usage is whenever you give me the data or I give you the data, you own the data all the way, no matter what the second use you will have. That's the problem.
So, what about Jian? There's also a parallel uh, research community around privacy preserving
Yeah.
analytics, privacy preserving machine learning. So this is
Yes.
differential privacy, homomorphic
Yeah.
encryption, and federated learning, and all these things. So, uh, do these techniques make it uh, more palatable for users to actually participate in these data markets? Oh, by the way, the other parallel thing that's happening is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So if there were early efforts to do data markets where if you share your data, then you might get some cryptocurrency in exchange. I don't know. I mean, none of them took off because it was technically too hard to implement.
You have two good questions. One is about the privacy. Definitely, the privacy preservation techniques can help to make the data exchange, data usage better. But at the same time, it doesn't really eliminate the problem, because the challenge or opportunity, because privacy is for the provide the individuals or the organizations. But if the individual and the organization really contribute data, then definitely they still should be rewarded accordingly. So these two things are orthogonal and they help each other.
Yeah,
And
but also the privacy preserving stuff may make it possible, for example,
yeah,
for multiple hospitals to
yeah,
work
to
together.
collaborate. Yeah,
Yeah.
like federated learning. They really can collaborate together to learn, to build a model. And they can even personalize the model so that it fits individuals' needs.
Right. But in the end, the objective is to get a better model.
Yeah, together. Well, in general, it's a better model, but this better may mean many different things for different people. For example, maybe more accurate. They may mean more robust. They may mean fair. Yeah. So the second question is about blockchain. Blockchain indeed is a very interesting technique. We should pay attention to that because now we already know a lot of work on using blockchain to build data markets or data exchange because we can use blockchain to trace the usage of data.
So the one thing I would say is that it still needs better UX. Because I actually went to there was a startup of a friend of mine. They were trying to do a data exchange on using crypto and blockchain.
Yeah.
I went to kind of a hackathon to try out the technology. There were just too many steps to get onboarded, and I was telling them, look, data scientists and analysts, they don't want to deal with all this blockchain stuff. They just want to use data.
Yeah. And also we need to look at when we talk about the data markets is what are the participants of the market, whether those are the business or the massive individual users are there. The mechanisms, the scalability, the efficiency, user interface, those things are all vary, depends on the participants.
So let me put you on the spot. Let's say you're giving a keynote in front of chief data officers or data scientists, right? So in industry, and you want to get them excited about pricing data in data markets. So what are the top pieces of advice that you would give them?
First, data is like the money. If your company needs a CFO, you probably need another officer to look at your data. They are the key resource. Second, when you think about data, bring in economists, build an economic team to work with you on the data problem. This is not something too strange, right? I mean, data is far beyond just technology. Third, every company has a scope much bigger than they thought because of the data, because the upstream and downstream applications of data. Are they good enough?
I would add one more thing, which is basically security today is really about data security.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So take data security and data privacy very, very seriously. Yeah. So you closed your paper with future research directions and future challenges. So what are some of those?
There's several things. At the macro level, I think the important thing is to build this end-to-end pipeline for data usage. Indeed, this is similar to this supply chain in the real products, because if we treat the data as the resources, as the products. But we will have, because the nature of data, indeed, we will have a supply network instead of just a supply chain. So this is a big issue. It involves economics, it involves technology, it involves the enterprise management and communication, a lot of things. And at the micro level, we need to look at many issues, for example, fairness in data exchange and data pricing. This is very critical, and privacy preservation and security, and particularly when you want to connect the two parties, a buyer and a seller, about the data, then they first need to give a try on the data. And data is something not like if you try it, you don't like it, you cannot take it back because the data is already in the other side. So there are a lot of things we need to work on. And also we have, academia has quite a few different data pricing models, but most of those models just stay at the academia level. They need to be pushed down into practice and then really learn how to work in practice.
So who builds the academic pricing models? Are they economists?
Both. There are a lot of different, economics and also the data scientists and the combined. Yeah. My belief is that no model is right. Every model will be broken in practice because they always meet some new challenges. But some models are better than the others, and some models are lasting longer than the others. At different time, different scenarios, different applications, we may need different models. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I concur, particularly as someone who worked in hedge funds and worked on option valuation models.
yes, yes.
Um,
And also
speaking of which, John, so there are some situations where there's so much more market activity between buyers and sellers. It's much easier to come up with the right price, right? And then
yes.
there are situations where your data is so unique, the number of possible buyers is so few that it's much harder. Right?
Yeah. And indeed, that leads to my next direction. I think is very important is that, well, when we talk about the concrete product, it is a product, it's already there. So people can look at a static thing to make the evaluation. But for data, it's so dynamic. The application is dynamic, the data is dynamic, and also the availability of the data is dynamic. So how to dynamically model the market and be fair to all the parties, this is very, very challenging. And this is completely new.
Yeah. By the way, so your advice to companies was interesting because basically you're saying to the audience is, look, you're also producing data. Data is an asset.
Yeah.
Make sure you know the value of this asset.
Yeah.
Sometimes that may mean having to have people with economics background on your team.
Yeah.
Right. But don't underestimate the value of your data asset and your ability, and don't think that you will be unable to monetize your data assets, right?
Yeah, that's very important.
Because basically what you think might not be that valuable may actually be valuable to others, right?
Yeah, exactly. Indeed, that's the challenge for many companies, particularly those middle-sized and small-sized companies in the traditional industry. They don't think themselves as data producers. And you need to put them into data producer role.
So actually, there's one more topic I wanted to talk to you, and I will play my cards, lay my cards on the table. So synthetic data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people talk about synthetic data. I don't need actual data. I can just use synthetic data. Well, a couple of things. One, synthetic data means you're trying to simulate a situation, right? So let's say computer vision, you're trying to build a simulator that's realistic enough that it can simulate edge cases in complex physics. And that's going to be very hard to do. Number one, there's so many edge cases, and the physics of the real world can get really complex fast. By the time you build this amazing simulator, you might as well just collect data.
Yeah.
So what's your sense? So, I mean, it's not saying that synthetic data has no value. I just think that its value might be more in testing your model or just around testing and robustness and things like that. But if you're looking at situations where you have complex physics and dynamics, it's just, I don't think, and that's why I think a lot of people, for example, in the self-driving car world, they spend a lot of time in data collection, labeling and data collection, right? So,
yes.
because the edge cases are just impossible to create, right? So,
yeah. Well, I would say synthetic data or synthetic data generation is a tool, is a reflection. So in order to produce meaningful synthetic data, you need to have some understanding of the reality. You need to have your subject you want to reflect, right?
Yeah.
So that's a data collection you mentioned.
Yeah. If your situation is very complex, right? So drones, self-driving cars,
Yeah.
it just gets hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the value. To some extent, indeed, I think the self-driving cars, they need the good data collection.
Yeah, I mean, actually, if you listen to earnings report of Tesla, I think Elon Musk has been on record where they invest a lot of money in data collection, data labeling. They're trying to make their labeling tools better and better, so their labelers can be much more efficient.
Yeah.
Of course, the nirvana will be automatic labeling, but that's far from reality at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why. Let me tell you one story. I think the best combination of automatic driving car is the taxi companies. Why? Because taxi companies are so easy to sign one deal contract so that you can collect data. And second,
Right.
whenever you have an update or upgrade, in the evening you just call back the car and upgrade every car.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. So, anything else
I
that
think we
you want to leave our audience with in terms of uh, this? This is, I mean, to the listeners out there, this is an exciting area. I mean, I think that
yes.
as Jan notes, right? So the goal of companies is to build all of these foundational technologies so they have end-to-end pipelines,
Yes.
and data is at the heart of everything they do. And by
Yeah.
the way, John, in closing, one thing I think that data professionals, data engineers, data scientists, analysts vastly underestimate is UX.
Yes.
Data collection. Data
Yeah.
collection starts with good UX. If
Yeah.
you have good UX, your own users may even help you fix data problems.
Yes,
Right?
that's
So
accurate.
so they can if you give them a mechanism for them to suggest uh, corrections to your model,
Yeah.
they might even help you with labeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I would conclude is that as data scientists, we need to think about one step further is how to connect your users, your downstream applications. An important thing is to think about the value of your data, your application, your models. And then when you think about the value, and marketing business is something you cannot avoid. And so pricing, evaluation are important things to do. And indeed, I even advocate that in all the training components of data scientists, we should have an economic component to let the people have the basic principles.
So is this so John, so you've mentioned economists twice. So first, in industry, have you seen companies employ economists for this purpose? And secondly, in your own role as someone who trains prospective data scientists, are you trying to integrate this material?
First, they're big companies. It is a known secret. They have
Yeah,
building a stronger and stronger economics team. For example, Amazon,
yeah,
Google.
yeah, yeah. So tech companies, I think, is fine. But what about regular enterprise?
Regular enterprise, indeed, they more and more set up the CIO role or CDO roles, and then those roles more and more they need to collaborate with their CFO, their economic board members to put down a whole package to protect, to evaluate, to protect, and also promote their data and their data asset.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think a lot of people forget that CDOs are responsible for what you described, which is the
Yes,
end pipeline, right?
yeah, the
Yeah,
pipeline. The
yeah, yeah,
CDO, CIO essentially is the whole pipeline.
yeah.
They don't
So,
look at the technical part. They don't fight with their CTO.
so what about in your role as a teacher? Are you only teaching Jian people how to build better models?
No, indeed, I teach my data mining courses, and then in those courses, I try to explain to user the students the end-to-end pipeline. and why data collection and data cleaning, data preparation takes about 70% of the whole effort. And data
I
model
mean,
building is only a small
that's
piece.
still the case. That's
Yeah,
still the case. I mean, by the time you get to building the model, you're basically doing somersaults. You're so happy. You know,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
fun part of the job.
yeah. And also how to bring it to the next
Production.
step, your users. So
Uh,
that's the pricing. I try to add some materials to the teaching. Yeah, it's fun.
so is the topics you wrote about in your good survey paper on data pricing, is that are you beginning to work that into your courses?
Yeah, some of the material indeed is integrated into my courses in the my university, and also gave talks in the some premier conferences. For example, I gave a tutorial last year in the KDD conference.
Yeah, actually, this is my last question to you, which is basically for people who are interested in this topic. Uh,
They are welcome to contact me.
are people starting to have conferences around some of the topics we talked about, or maybe
Oh
just even
yes,
workshops?
yes. In general, the e-commerce conference has more and more topic related discussions about the data pricing, although they still carry the e-commerce conference title, but I mean, that's the history reason. And second, in KDD, in those data mining conference or ICML, the new IPS, those machine learning conferences, there are more and more papers, publications discussing data pricing and data evaluation issues. So the chain is coming very clearly. I can smell it, I can hear it.
Very good, because as readers will note, and I will link to this in my post, I
Thank
gave
you.
a keynote about this topic 2 years ago. I was so excited. Uh, and then it kind of just faded a little bit. But now, as I noted, more and more data marketplaces and data exchanges, I think this topic will be front and center moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. Indeed, I watched your keynote yesterday. Many things you said are still there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I gave that keynote right maybe a week before GDPR became live.
Yeah,
But yeah, and I think as I said, I've been running into more people working on data exchanges.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, a great conversation.